y'all, and welcome back. I don't know why I just said howdy, y'all. Welcome to this awkward close-up of my face. That is because I am in a different location, which is really not set up for filming, but my kid is sick and at home, and so they took over the living room where I normally film, so I have been pushed off to another room. This week, I want to welcome you back to the 90s, that magical land of, what did we have? We had Buffy and butterfly clips and clubwear, and then remember those pacifiers? That was a weird trend. Hypercolor and flannel and, well, other things. Most of which I've seen on those reminiscing videos here on YouTube, and I never actually experienced them. Anyway, we're going to journey back in the, I want to say Wayback Machine. I don't know if that's copyrighted. But we are going to go way, way back, even though the 90s were only 10 years ago, trust me on this one. And we're going to remember the most popular movies of our youth. And I do say our because there is nobody out there who is younger than me. And I'm not old, you're old. Okay, it's just a big old reminiscing journey, fine. And so without further ado, I want to invite you to open up your caboodles box and see what the most popular movie was for each year. Let's find out. We're starting off in 1990. For 1990, the top American box office grossing movie was Ghost. Ghost was directed by Jerry Zucker. It starred Patrick Swayze, Demi Moore, or is it Demi Moore? Whoopi Goldberg, Tony Goldwyn. Ooh, the late great Vincent Schiavelli, or Schiavelli, is in this too. In Ghost, Swayze and Moore are the loving couple whose lives are upturned, like literally, when he is killed by a mugger. Not wanting to move on and leave his girlfriend right away, Swayze's ghost learns the mugging was a setup and that now his girlfriend may be in danger. He contacts a supposedly charlatan psychic who only realizes she is genuine when Swayze comes along, and she helps him find the real person behind his murder and thusly protect Moore. Only when this is accomplished can he move on. I haven't actually seen this movie in years, like since I was a kid, but I remember a decent amount, I think. There's a lot more here than the famous pottery scene, and Goldberg's performance is a particularly good one. This was Jerry Zucker's first movie directed on his own and not as part of a team, and it's his first dramatic movie. Screenwriter Bruce Joel Rubin said he got the idea while watching Hamlet, and thought it would be neat to tell the story in the modern day and from the ghost's perspective. The final shot of the film, with Swayze walking into the afterlife, used digital video effects, very swank. While not a critic's darling, the movie was, obviously, a big hit with audiences, and it did well at the Oscars, garnering noms for Best Picture, Editing, and Original Score, and gaining wins for Best Original Screenplay and Best Supporting Actress for Goldberg. There has, as is so often the case of late, been a stage musical version because nothing is original anymore, along with a Japanese remake version that had the female character as the ghost. In 2023, a reboot spearheaded by Channing Tatum was announced as forthcoming, because we just can't leave things alone anymore. I know he said there were problematic things in the original he wanted to change, but problematic things are part and parcel of the time in which they're made and provide a more complete picture of history. And if we keep overriding originals with reboots, then less and less people will potentially see the original work, and so what we make stands the test of time less and less, and if that is the case, what is the point of making anything? But maybe that's just me. 1991, the top American box office grossing movie was Terminator 2: Judgment Day, directed by James Cameron, starring Arnold Schwarzenegger, Linda Hamilton, Edward Furlong, Robert Patrick, and Joe Morton. As a point of interest, or maybe just to me, young John Connor's friend in the beginning scenes is played by Danny Cooksey. Cooksey is perhaps best known for his child role on Different Strokes, and later he also appeared on Nickelodeon's Salute Your Shorts and was the voice of Montana Max on Tiny Toons. Today he's a musician. This film is, obviously, a sequel to The Terminator in 1984, which I have not seen. But honestly, you don't have to understand what is going on here. Basically, in the future, mankind is engaged in an apocalyptic war with machines which have been launched by the mega company Skynet. Skynet attempts to kill Resistance leader John Connor by sending a shape-shifting cyborg assassin back in time, like you do. So he responds by sending back his own reprogrammed Terminator bot. In the Now Times, which was placed in 1995 actually, I had not picked up that it was set in that year, John Connor's mom is in a psychiatric hospital due to her ordeal from the first movie. She knows the apocalypse is coming, but nobody believes her. The Terminator, who is Arnold, the T-800, meets up with her son, and the two of them break her out. Now, Hamilton gives what I feel is an especially fantastic and rather nuanced performance, as not only a super awesome badass action-type lady, which was rare in those days, but also the mother wanting to protect her son, but putting aside her own feelings for the greater good, which kind of dovetails with the zealot, so committed to her own cause that she is willing to sacrifice even more people. It's not just conjecture as to her doubtful grip on sanity. Anyway, this little group locate the scientist behind Skynet and convince him of the consequences of his actions, which leads to his own sacrifice in the name of saving the future for all. Now, during all this, the never-ceasing pursuit by the T-1000 cyborg, Patrick, keeps the pace and urgency of events going and creating an undercurrent of suspense. At the last, the T-1000 is defeated, and the T-800, having forged a bond with John, bids a tearful, though that's one-sided, farewell as he destroys himself, hoping there will be nothing left for Skynet to use in cyborg development, so the apocalypse will be averted, and we have a time paradox, but that happens. Now, Robert Patrick, previously seen in Die Hard 2, was living in his car when he won the T-1000 audition, and he based his performance largely off of predatory animals, also largely eagles. I don't know if they're predatory or not. His extensive physical training enabled him to outrun Edward Furlong on the dirt bike chase scene, so the bike's speed had to be increased. Also, Denzel Washington was offered the role of Miles Dyson, but he turned it down as it required him to act scared. The film made use of special effects royalty, with Dennis Muren handling the CGI and Stan Winston the prosthetics and animatronics. The CGI is a bit off by today's standards, but it still holds up remarkably well, and particularly considering the time when it was made. The movie was a smash hit right off the bat, with tickets selling out like crazy, particularly due to word of mouth from the young folks. Critics overall were fairly favorable, liking the effects, the emotional journey of the original Terminator, and Furlong's and Morton's performances. It did well at many award ceremonies, particularly the sci-fi focused Saturn Awards, but predictably, as these things go, was more or less snubbed by the Academy, garnering no major categories, just nominations for editing and cinematography, and there were wins for best makeup, sound effects editing, and visual effects. There have, of course, been many Terminator films overall of varying quality, but thus far, this one is overwhelmingly considered the best of the group by many people. 1992, the best-selling, yada yada, you get the idea. Batman Returns. Batman Returns was directed by Tim Burton. It stars Michael Keaton, Michelle Pfeiffer, Danny DeVito, and Christopher Walken, plus Andrew Bryniarski, aka Leatherface in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and the always neat to spot Doug Jones. This one also features Vincent Prioli, so I'm going to consider him a good luck charm. Ooh, and it's Anna Katarina as the Poodle Lady. I loved her. This was the darkest of the Batman, and it's one of my personal favorites. The prologue of the movie shows the birth of the Penguin. His millionaire parents are repulsed by him and attempt to rid themselves of him by dropping his bassinet in the river. Years later, he appears in town, claiming his heritage and becoming a society darling by virtue of his sob story, which helps to conceal his nefarious doings with his circus reject gang. Bruce Wayne is suspicious and does his own detective work into this peculiar fellow. He also strikes up a flirtation with Selina Kyle, who is secretary to rich businessman Max Schreck. Ever since Selina unwittingly uncovered Shrek's own nefarious dealings and he attempted to murder her, she has had to deal with her own nefarious tendencies, which present as strangely cat-like. All the villains have a big showdown at the end around the penguin area at the zoo. This movie is dang dark indeed. It's the one where Burton had the most creative control, and it shows, but I just love it. The sets are fantastic. And those little penguins with their itty-bitty helmets, oh my gosh. The Penguin was one of the main villains here due to Warner Brothers itself wanting him, and Burton and screenwriter Sam Hamm, who was later replaced by Daniel Waters, wanted Catwoman. Interestingly, there has been much controversy of late about Batman killing people in his movies, but Batman does kill a couple of villains in this film. The subplot about the Penguin running for mayor was inspired by 2 episodes of the 1960s TV series. Annette Bening was originally cast as Catwoman but had to drop out due to pregnancy. Michelle Pfeiffer was given $2 million more in salary than Bening was offered. Marlon Wayans was cast as Robin until the character was dropped from the script. And the Penguins were reportedly treated very well, possibly better than the actors, being flown to shooting on an air-conditioned plane and having a chilled waiting area stocked daily with fresh fish. The last shot of the movie with Catwoman viewing the bat signal was also filmed last. Pfeiffer was booked at that time, so the shot was done with a stand-in. The film remained in first place for 3 weeks, but then ticket purchases dropped off tremendously. Critics liked the pacing compared with its predecessor, but were divided on how Burton's increased control improved the film or no. Many agreed the villain scenes were the best, placing Batman himself on the back burner. The cinematography and Pfeiffer's performance received the most accolades overall. Award season was not unkind, but the Oscars gave only 2 nominations for Best Makeup and Visual Effects, both of which went to other films. There were a decent amount of audience complaints about the violence and somewhat adult content in the movie, leading to Joel Schumacher being handed the franchise for the next 2 films. 1993, the best popular movie American, Jurassic Park. Directed by Steven Spielberg. Starring Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, Richard Attenborough, Joseph Mazzello, and Ariana Richards. Also featuring Wayne Knight, Samuel L. Jackson, and B.D. Wong. Based on the Michael Crichton novel, which is very good on its own, and must have had a heck of a pitch because 4 major studios were vying for the rights before the novel was even published. In the story, a rich industrialist backs cloning technology, which has progressed to the rate of being able to bring back dinosaurs. With what seems to be typical human forethought, at least according to the Jurassic Park franchise, he uses it to create a nature park supposedly safe for human visitors. When he invites a select group to tour the park before its opening, things begin to go horribly wrong. Who could have seen it coming? Some of the other studios bidding on the novel had directors in mind, and each casts a really different possible vision. Columbia Pictures had Richard Donner, Warner Brothers had Tim Burton, and 20th Century Fox had Joe Dante. I really like his movies, and it would have been very interesting to see that. Crichton himself backed Spielberg and Universal. Jim Cameron later revealed that he too had bid on the picture, but he was glad he didn't get it after he saw Spielberg's more kid-friendly version. Spielberg cited the films Hatari and King Kong as inspirations, but said he was mostly attempting to do a pseudo-sequel to Jaws. Also, at first, Dr. Ian Malcolm was written out of the script, but the character was put back in after Jeff Goldblum auditioned. Jim Carrey also tried out for the role. Overall, lesser-known actors were cast on purpose due to the projected cost of the effects. Unsurprisingly, this film also utilized the talents of Dennis Muren and Stan Winston, along with an early production effort by Phil Tippett on stop-motion effects. Along with all the other digital effects, this movie used early face replacement for the stunt double of Ariana Richards. The movie was a box office bonanza, though to be fair, its main competition was Last Action Hero, which to this day seems to appeal to more of a niche audience, like me. I love that movie. Critics appreciated the film as well as the mass public, with only a few carping about the admittedly slightly weaker human story element. Award season was kind, but the Academy held to its tradition of pretty much snubbing anything with a sci-fi or fantasy element, giving nods only for best sound, sound effects, and visual effects, and it gained wins for each. The biggest box office American picture, 1994. The Lion King, directed by Roger Allers and Rob Minkoff, starring Matthew Broderick, Jeremy Irons, James Earl Jones, Jonathan Taylor Thomas, Cheech Marin, Whoopi Goldberg, and Robert Guillaume. Also features Rowan Atkinson, Nathan Lane in arguably the role that made his career, and Ernie Sabella. Yet another one, obviously, inspired by Hamlet. It follows a pride of African lions, with their king training his son to follow in his stead. The king's jealous brother kills him and convinces the prince that his father's death was all his fault. The son runs away, only returning when grown. He finds the pride doing poorly, as the new king has mismanaged his reign and the land is overhunted. Learning the truth about his father's death, he challenges his uncle. In the ensuing fight, the usurper dies and the prince becomes the rightful king. Later remade by Disney itself in a, reportedly, I refuse to watch it myself, subpar live version. Yet another Disney movie, like Mulan, see, again, B.D. Wong in that, where they had a singer instead of the main actor perform the songs, even when the main actor can actually sing. Guess it just wasn't the sound they were looking for? Like, Matthew Broderick can sing. That said, can we talk about how amazing voice actor Jim Cummings is, as he did part of the singing for Jeremy Irons, as well as for Christopher Lloyd in Anastasia, and in both movies you can't tell the difference. Also, Jason Weaver, singing voice of young Simba, recorded his songs the day he came in for his audition. Not counting The Rescuers Down Under, this was the first Disney movie to be an original story. Lane and Sabella auditioned for Zazu and a hyena, respectively, but were then asked to read together, and were then recast. Cheech and Chong were to be reunited as hyenas, but Chong was unavailable, and Goldberg requested a part in the film. Scar animator Andreas Deja, who animated a lot of Disney villains, watched some of Jeremy Irons' films in order to incorporate his movements. Many animators did not want to work on the project, as they believed the upcoming Pocahontas would be the more popular of the two, and plus they had to learn how to properly animate four-legged, non-human-like animals. The film made bank at the box office, and I remember first seeing the preview, you knew this film was going to be a big deal. And it was the first Disney release to be translated into Zulu. Critics liked it overall, feeling it more geared toward grown-ups, although some felt the narrative was uneven. Again, as was typical for the Oscars, an animated feature just couldn't be taken too seriously. Beauty and the Beast was a fluke. The movie received noms for Best Original Score, which it won, and 3 Best Original Songs, winning for Can You Feel the Love Tonight. The soundtrack also received several Grammys. The big one for 1995, Batman Forever, directed by Joel Schumacher, starring Val Kilmer, Nicole Kidman, Jim Carrey, Tommy Lee Jones, and Chris O'Donnell. It also features Drew Barrymore, Debbie Mazar, and En Vogue. I did not know that was them! This was the famous Let's Add Nipples to the Batsuit movie. A Technicolor shock to the system after the darkness of Batman Returns, this film leans heavily into high-gloss comic veneer as Batman goes up against Two-Face and the Riddler. The film never gets deep, paying lip service to Batman's childhood trauma and Robin's new young man trauma, as we see Two-Face kill Robin's family. Purportedly, Schumacher wanted to make the film more like a comic book, even to the extreme candid angles which can make it hard to watch, a comment which leads me to believe the man has never read a comic book in his life. Kilmer and Kidman are both talented actors, but they aren't given much to work with and come across as flat. Jones tries but is flat out miscast. This is Carey's film to run away with, and that he does, even injecting the movie's ever so slight bit of actual pathos, as we see his ignored, socially awkward Edward Nygma give in to insanity and revenge against Bruce Wayne, who he blames for his problems. His energy and characteristic Carey goofiness are at times edged with real anger. This is one of the performances that showed he had more than just Ace Ventura to give as an actor. Keaton was going to continue the role but decided to leave it behind. Rene Russo was the original choice for Chase Meridian. Batman was also offered to Ethan Hawke and Keanu Reeves. Carey got the Riddler role only after Robin Williams turned it down. Mitch Gaylord, an Olympic gymnast, played Robin's older brother and was also Chris O'Donnell's stunt double. Rick Baker provided prosthetics. Two of the visual effects artists on the film were Jim Rigel and Andrew Adamson of later Lord of the Rings fame. Also, motion capture technology was obtained from video game company Acclaim Entertainment to use for the film. Very early stuff there. Awards were relatively light for this one, although composer Elliot Goldenthal was nominated for a Grammy. Oscar noms came through for Best Cinematography, Sound, and Sound Effects Editing, but lost in all three categories. The soundtrack was incredibly popular, coming close in sales to the soundtrack for the first Batman, and spawning the hits Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me by U2 and Kiss from a Rose by Seal. Give it a listen, it's quite good. Biggest one for 1996, Independence Day. Directed by Roland Emmerich. Starring Will Smith, Jeff Goldblum, Bill Pullman, Randy Quaid, and Vivica A. Fox. Also features Judd Hirsch, Mary McDonnell, and René Auberjonois. I love saying his name. Aliens invade Earth, and humanity has to defend its existence. I mean, okay, there's more to it than that, but still, pretty much that. It's not an overly complicated film in terms of plot. There's a lot of pew 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 and some emotional moments which serve as a slight rest before the next pew pew pew, so it's an action movie. But it is really well done. It comes from Emmerich and Dean Devlin, the team that brought you Stargate, which is also about a parasitic alien race attempting to subjugate the galaxy, or is it the entire universe? I'm a little fuzzy on that one. Apparently, Devlin wanted his aliens not to be sneaky on their human takeover, as was so often the case in extraterrestrial movies, but to arrive with a big splash, like they're making an entrance at the Met Gala, I guess. Apparently, also, the military was supposed to provide uniforms and planes for the film, but rescinded the offer when the producers refused to remove all the Area 51 references. Christopher Weaver, one of the creators of the Elder Scrolls Online game, was a consultant on the movie, and purportedly was the basis for the David Levinson character. Other trivia of interest includes the fact that the line, "Today we celebrate our Independence Day," was a last-minute addition to President Whitmore's speech, and the film was nearly released under the title Doomsday, because competing studio Warner Brothers had released a 1983 film under the same title, and they only gave up the rights to 20th Century Fox after 2 weeks of legal wrangling. The interior White House sets were used on 2 other films, Nixon and The American President. The score, composed by Britisher David Arnold, contained, according to him, every last ounce of stereotypical Americana he could muster for the occasion. Purportedly, this was also the film that started the tradition of hopeful blockbusters airing their premiere ads during the Super Bowl. Critical response was pretty much what you'd expect. They praised the effects, with some also pointing up the believable reaction from the panicked crowds when attacked. The characterizations were largely panned as cardboard, but many critics still appreciated it for what it was, a summer popcorn movie. The nationalistic tones weren't greatly welcomed overseas, although it did garner a win at the Czech Lion Awards for the most successful movie in cinemas, so take that as you will. Predictably, the Oscars were also not welcoming, with 2 nominations for Best Sound and Visual Effects, which it, as you might have guessed, won. Biggest movie in 1997! Men in Black. Directed by Barry Sonnenfeld. Starring Will Smith, Tommy Lee Jones, Vincent D'Onofrio, Linda Fiorentino, and Rip Torn. Tony Shalhoub, John Grease, and David Cross also make appearances. Will Smith and aliens were a winning combination, and Columbia Pictures took notice. This one takes even more advantage of Smith's signature sass, say that 5 times fast, as he portrays a cop who stumbles upon a shadow organization regulating the immigration of aliens into New York City. You know, this and the previous movie could be seen as 2 competing perspectives on the same issue. Most of the aliens are peaceful and just want to integrate, but there is the occasional bad actor. Smith and Jones, wow, how American last name can you get, are tasked with keeping peace, and end up on the trail of D'Onofrio's villainous, slimy, literally, character. As was the case for many female roles of the time, Fiorentino gets to be there too. So far, we've had 2 movies for Will Smith, 2 movies for Tommy Lee Jones, and 2 movies for Jeff Goldblum, and you could be forgiven for thinking that there were only so many American male actors to go around in the 90s. We had to ration them. Then again, nowadays you've got like 15 Chris Pratt movies in a row, so maybe we didn't know how good we had it. The movie was offered to Sonnenfeld due to his helming of the Addams Family movies, and the studio wanted much the same flavor. He was busy at the time with Get Shorty, so the film was passed around, offered to such directors as John Landis and Quentin Tarantino. After it was done making the rounds, Sonnenfeld was free again, and then took over. The setting was originally supposed to be in various locations such as Nevada, but Sonnenfeld felt that New York City would be the perfect place for aliens trying to blend in. Rick Baker was in charge of the prosthetics, and had to answer to both Sonnenfeld and producer Steven Spielberg, who was heavily involved. Critics largely enjoyed the film's creature designs and deadpan humor, although many of them felt it had exhausted its premise by the second half of the story. The Academy recognized it with nominations for Best Art Direction, Original Score, and Makeup, which was its only win. 1998. Armageddon... couldn't resist. Directed by Blow 'em Up Michael Bay. Starring Bruce Willis, Ben Affleck, Liv Tyler, and Billy Bob Thornton. It also features William Fichtner, Owen Wilson, and Steve Buscemi. Space and disaster movies ruled the latter half of the 90s box office. This one has another extraterrestrial threat to the planet and our very existence that has to be defended by a scrappy band of blue-collar outcasts. This story has never been told before. An asteroid is heading straight for Earth and will expunge all life unless we come up with a way to stop it. Talk about disaster movies, it also seemed like there were at least 2 of everything. Like we couldn't come up with enough natural disasters. Volcano competed with Dante's Peak. This one competed with the other asteroid movie, Deep Impact, which I have not seen and can't comment on. Armageddon has earned the distinction of being part of the Criterion Collection, which many see as a highly questionable choice, and it has been heavily defended by certain spokespeople as a celebration of working men, a work of art by a cutting-edge artist. I mean, look, it's okay to just say, I just like it, okay? That's fine. It's okay to admit it's not that great a movie, you just like it. Generally, critics were far less kind, and clips of the film actually elicited laughs from journalists when exhibited at the Cannes Festival. Siskel and Ebert came to a split decision. Siskel enjoyed the film as he found it amusing, but Ebert rates it as one of his most hated. Many critics zeroed in on the editing, with Todd McCarthy of Variety particularly likening it to a machine gun stuck in the firing position for 2.5 hours. NASA actually insisted on a disclaimer in the end credits to show they did not endorse the scientific accuracy or inaccuracy of said film. Deep Impact was noted as more accurate by various astronomers. In 2011, 4 postgrad physics students wrote a paper dissecting just how unlikely it was that the plan of the film, which was to blow up the asteroid in space, would succeed. Even Ben Affleck stated that he had asked Michael Bay why it would be easier to train oil drillers to become astronauts instead of the other way around, to which he never got an answer. And Neil deGrasse Tyson is quoted as saying that for many years, Armageddon was the American movie which had violated the most laws of physics. So suffice to say, I don't think accuracy was a great concern of Michael Bay's. But then, let's be fair, it's a summer popcorn movie. And American audiences, at least, don't tend to look for accuracy in summer movies. They just want something fun while they sit in a dark room for 2 hours beating the heat. Summer is for fun, or so the advertising goes. It's a chance to take a break and enjoy yourself, so yeah, fair. The movie did get a few Academy Award nominations, but no wins. Nominations for Best Visual Effects, Sound Effects Editing, and Original Song. I Don't Want to Miss a Thing by Aerosmith, which had so much airplay at the time you could not get away from the darn song. It was the Everything I Do It For You of its time. Last but not least, 1999. A little-known film of these days called Star Wars Episode I: The Phantom Menace. I was there. I was there through it all. The build-up, the anticipation, I don't know if I've seen it equaled for a single movie within my lifetime. And the subsequent disappointment. Okay, let's back up quickly. If somehow you don't know what this movie is about, it is the prequel to the original 3 Star Wars movies in which we meet Luke and Leia's mommy and daddy, and begin the journey of learning how Anakin Skywalker went from a cherubic lad with a knack for pod racing to the villainous scourge of the galaxy. Directed by George Lucas. Starring Ewan McGregor, Liam Neeson, Natalie Portman, Jake Lloyd, and Ahmed Best. Also features Pernilla August, Anthony Daniels, Kenny Baker, Ian McDiarmid, I never knew how to pronounce his name, I'm sorry, Samuel L. Jackson, and Ray Park. Lucas had always envisioned the saga as just that, with numerous chapters, but he held off writing the story until the early 90s, when he decided SFX had advanced to the level he desired. The film relied heavily on digital effects, more than most movies up until that time. John Williams again composed the soundtrack, including the fantastic earworm Duel of the Fates. The trailer for the film was released first before the films Meet Joe Black and then Wing Commander, and it was reported that many people paid full admission to those just to see the preview. The actual release was so huge that some companies had to close for the day as too many of their workers were taking off to go see the movie. Critics were largely unimpressed, citing the characters as being uncompelling, the writing flat, and the pacing slow. There were a few who concentrated on the better moments, pointing out that no film could possibly ever hold up to the incredibly heavy expectations placed upon it, as was upon this one, which is quite true. Roger Ebert, converse to most, liked the film, and gave it 3.5 stars from 4. The film received 3 Academy Award nominations in Best Sound, Sound Effects Editing, and Visual Effects, losing in all 3 categories to The Matrix. From the standpoint of someone who was there. We had experienced all this before to a point, with the release a few years prior of Lucas's retooled vision of the original Star Wars trilogy. Now, going to it in a group made a difference, as we had our collective enthusiasm to carry us along, and it was only afterward that we quieted down a bit and reflected on what we had seen. The additions to the original trilogy were neat to see, but really didn't add anything to the story, and it's downright irritating that all the releases since of the films have been with the new additions. I have the originals, and our family only watches those. Now, with this new episode, it was much the same. Did I mention the level of anticipation was off the charts? You have no idea unless you were there. I remember standing in a long line just to get tickets. We saw the ads, many of which featured Darth Maul, and it was very exciting. He was so cool looking, and we knew we were going to get a great villain. When we finally sat in our seats and watched the movie, there was applause just about every 5 seconds. When the opening crawl began, when we met the droids, when Obi-Wan first appeared on screen with the classic "I have a bad feeling about this," it was more about the experience than about the quality of the movie itself. And that was the issue. Because special effects, no matter how good or bad they are, cannot substitute for a poorly told story. The pacing was slow. The movie plodded along, and despite Lucas's assertion that this was one for the kids, and there was a decent amount of annoyingly juvenile humor, there was far too much dry political talk to support that idea. There were parts that Lucas put in, such as the bad feeling line, the droids coming into the story, etc., that seemed forced. They were in there purely to bait the core audience, and they felt that way. Our hotly anticipated great villain was barely in the film, and when he finally got his admittedly fun and fairly well done lightsaber battle at the end, it was over before you had barely got settled in. All this is without mentioning Jar Jar. Yes, he was annoying, and the character was disturbingly reminiscent of the step and fetch it stereotype of old. Plenty of other racial stereotypes in this film, definitely. But I never felt he was that annoying, and voice actor Ahmed Best said he got so much flack that he thought about ending his life. So let's lay off Jar Jar, okay? Now, the movie has aged decently well for many, because of nostalgia. Kids who saw it at the time have now grown up with it, and they have fond memories. And I get that, because let's pick something more from my generation. The Flight of the Navigator is not a great film by any means, but I like it. I look back on it fondly. I remember watching it as a kid, and fond memories, sure. And the political talk has become regarded as prescient of much in current times. I still don't feel the movie is actually good overall, and the effects haven't aged too well, which is another problem with relying on effects over story. I did mention this in Ghost, but at least Ghost had a fairly decent story. I will not allow my own kids to watch this movie until they're older, and able to view it through a more informed lens. That said, it's not a horrible film by any means. There are still enjoyable parts. And again, it's more than true enough that no movie could ever meet the insanely heavy expectation that this one was faced with. And I never expected it to. I just hoped for more than what we got. So there we are. Fun little trip down memory lane. Again, I thought it was fun. I love film history. Well, oh, it's so weird to think of your youth as history, but here we are today. And this was admittedly a big part of my youth, because in 1990 I turned 11, and by 1999 I was 20. So, big stretch of formative years there. Which of these movies is your favorite? Which ones do you particularly remember fondly or not so fondly? Which ones have you seen and which ones have you not? Are there any particular memories associated with these movies? And lastly, did you like Phantom Menace, and if so, why? I'm not judging, I really want to know. Put them down in the comments. I will see you next week. Until then, watch more movies, read more books, take care of yourselves and each other, especially in these uncertain times. I'll be thinking of you all. And I will see you next week. Bye now.